When you first start Final Fantasy XV, you are welcomed with a simple yet poignant message. 15 is a Final Fantasy for fans and first-timers. With that claim, Square Enix sets a new trajectory for the aging JRPG series that aims to reinforce what fans of the series have come to love, while bringing the series more in line with its Western counterparts. And while Square Enix has flirted with the idea of injecting the series with more Western design philosophies in the past, Final Fantasy XV is the developer's biggest effort to do so to date, and they have found great success in doing so. But while they are able to revitalize the aging JRPG juggernaut with modern mechanics, Final Fantasy XV's story is unable to meet the high standards set by its predecessors and fans alike. In Final Fantasy XV, you play from the perspective of the young and somewhat apathetic Prince Noctis, whose father has sent him on a mission of peace to wed his childhood friend and oracle to the gods, Lunafreya. Journeying with him are his 3 bodyguards, who serve as much as his friends and mentors as they are his protectors. But what starts as a simple bros road trip to Noctis' wedding soon goes awry when his kingdom is double-crossed by the Empire of Niflheim, turning him into a prince without a land to call home.
Cor?
So, you made it.
The hell's going on?
Where are you?
Outside the city, with no way back in.
He soon discovers on his journey to reclaim his throne that his greater destiny is to fulfill his obligation as the chosen king of Lucis and repulse the forces of darkness with the power of light, a power only the chosen king can wield. So it's the old save the world from darkness story. Great. A little cliche, but a solid basis to build a story around. The problem is, Final Fantasy XV doesn't really do that, at least not well. Like a lot of open world games, Final Fantasy XV struggles to find a balance between narrative exposition and freedom of exploration. While the first half of the game offers the player almost total freedom to explore, it offers very little in structuring a narrative to support the rest of the game. And while the second half does an admirable job of trying to salvage the story, it comes a little too late. Unfortunately, by the end of the game, I was left completely disinterested in the antagonist and confused on what even his motivations were. And in a series that produced such notable villains as Kefka and Sephiroth, it's hard not to be a little disappointed here.
A man of no consequence.
The lion's share of the story is focused on building out the relationship between Noctis and his allies, which is done very well and a genuine highlight of the experience. Being around the same age, Noctis and Prompto have an almost sibling relationship, whereas Ignis and Gladio serve as more of surrogate fathers and mentors to Noctis, providing him with wisdom and guidance. It's a fun dynamic and does a great job in strengthening the camaraderie between the characters and the player's emotional investment in them. However, it's a shame that the supporting characters are not given the same level of affection, and the entire story suffers because of it.
There's nothing we could do!
There's a robust cast of supporting characters, but the game spends little to no time developing them, making it difficult to empathize or become attached to them. This is a widespread problem in Final Fantasy XV. These are important characters, and their lack of development kept me from emotionally investing in the overall story because some of these characters are essential to do so. While I enjoyed the tight focus paid to Noctis' group, characters like Lunafreya desperately need to be fleshed out more. Amongst several of the new innovations to the series, 15 introduces Final Fantasy's first true open world, and pairs it with a new action combat system that is the most radical departure from the series' turn-based roots yet. And while Final Fantasy has toyed with open worlds in the past, most notably in Final Fantasy XII, you've always been constrained by story progression. You were only allowed to explore so far before you were forced to continue the story because of an impassable obstacle. 15 largely does away with this restriction, granting you the ability to explore almost the entirety of Lucis from the start, allowing you to complete side quests and progress the story at your own pace, instead of the game's. And while you may come across an occasional roadblock, they are few and far between compared to the ones of the series past.
If the road ahead's blocked, then we find a way around.
While you explore the world map, you'll discover plenty of small towns, outposts, and campsites that offer opportunities to take on new quests, restock items, and even enjoy a hot meal. Eating meals at diners or campsites also has the added benefit of applying stats buffs to your party like temporary attack and health upgrades. That can give you the little boost you need to overcome a tough boss. However, my personal favorite was an experience multiplier granted by spending the night at hotels and caravans that made leveling up easier. Even though it doesn't come cheap, I usually found the benefits well worth it. It's essential to take full advantage of the resources at your disposal too, because being caught by a powerful demon or boss can bring Noctis' journey home to an early end. Besides the main story, 15 offers plenty of extra content to entice you from the beaten path. However, I was a little underwhelmed by the lack of variety in the side quests available. While series staples like hunts make a welcome return and can provide an excellent challenge, most side missions are just bland fetch quests that offer little in the way of excitement. During one quest, I had to travel to the same remote farm on 3 separate occasions just to deliver vegetables.
Without further ado, we need you to harvest crops.
Harvest?
While I enjoyed having the freedom to explore the deserts and forests of Lucis at my leisure, it was the combat that kept me engaged and coming back for more throughout my 68-hour playthrough. Traditionally, Final Fantasy and turn-based combat have gone hand in hand, but 15 bucks tradition and opts instead for an action-based system that innovates on several series staples. I want to be clear, I love turn-based combat and would love for Final Fantasy to continue to innovate in that style. Having said that, the new action combat system in Final Fantasy 15 is the most exciting thing to happen to the series in years. The action of 15 is fast-paced and a little hectic, but in a good way. I often found myself engaging one group of enemies only to have a second or third group join the fray, requiring me to reconsider my tactics on the fly. This meant there was no cookie-cutter solution in every battle and kept combat interesting. Luckily, nearly every enemy has a list of fully exploitable weaknesses to take advantage of. Whether an enemy is weak to a specific weapon type like lances or greatswords, or a different magical element like fire or thunder, there's usually some weakness to even the odds. Fleshing out the fast-paced combat, Noctis has an assortment of warping and phasing abilities that give him an edge in the direst of situations. With a quick button tap, Noctis can phase through incoming attacks, allowing you to perform powerful parries and blindside attacks. And if you get overwhelmed, you can quickly warp Noctis to safety, allowing him to regenerate his health and MP, while also setting you up to deliver a devastating warp strike attack when you return to the skirmish. You can upgrade Noctis' abilities and stats by spending ability points through the Ascension menu, which is a group of skill trees similar to the Sphere Grid in Final Fantasy X. And while you cannot control the other party members directly, each character has a variety of techniques that can be unlocked and used in tandem with Noctis' warping abilities to set up a range of team-based attacks. Of course, there wouldn't be Final Fantasy without magic, and Final Fantasy 15 delivers in spades. But there are some notable changes from what you may be used to. In Final Fantasy 15, magic is no longer connected to an MP gauge, but is instead an expendable item that must be equipped to one of Noctis' 4 weapon slots, and has a cooldown time preventing you from depending too heavily on it. The energy for spells is gathered from draw points scattered across the map, and are all centered around the basic elements of fire, lightning, and ice. You can increase the potency of a spell or add a debilitating effect like poison by mixing in items in a higher amount of the corresponding element. Doing so can result in some truly powerful attacks with world-transforming effects.
Don't get hit!
Summons also make a big return in Final Fantasy 15, bringing the most visually impressive and powerful attacks we've seen in the series to date. However, to compensate for that increase in power, you no longer can summon them at will. Instead, summons are triggered when certain environmental and party parameters are met, which I admit are a little tricky to figure out. So I would have liked to have had a simpler option to utilize them, even if it meant a slight downgrade in power. I liked the summons, and I understand that they're supposed to be rare and therefore make you appreciate them more. But during my entire playthrough, I was only ever able to activate 2 of the summons available, which left me with the impression that I was missing out on a crucial part of the Final Fantasy experience. Although Final Fantasy XV's new take on combat is a fun and welcome surprise, a few issues popped up from time to time. I often found that after I defeated one enemy, Noctis would, for some reason, occasionally put away his weapon, preventing me from facing through incoming attacks I normally would have avoided with ease. While this was only a minor annoyance, it did occur frequently enough to garner mention. I also had frequent issues when trying to use Noctis' armature technique. The armature is Final Fantasy XV's take on a limit break and allows Noctis to summon the spectral forms of his ancestors' weapons to aid him in battle, providing a significant boost in offense. However, the armature is mapped to the same buttons as the skill menu and long-con function, and requires them to be pressed simultaneously, which as it turns out, is a lot harder to do than you would think. On numerous occasions, I tried to activate armature only to accidentally bring up the skill menu instead, costing me valuable time and making me question why Square Enix chose to map the armature here in the first place. After spending roughly 68 hours with Final Fantasy XV, I kept thinking back on Square Enix's claim that this was a game for both fans and newcomers, but couldn't help feeling like that promise went unfulfilled, at least partially. I was left feeling like it was caught between two worlds, and one, Square Enix wants to remind fans of the series' lofty past, while on the other they sought to shed the trappings of that past and reinvent the series as a Western-style RPG. The results were ultimately mixed. With Final Fantasy XV's new combat system and massive open world, it is easily the most successful entry in the series to date. However, poor character development and a lackluster story may fail to live up to expectations of series' longtime fans. Overall, Final Fantasy XV successfully reintroduces the series into the modern era of massive open world RPGs, but it loses some of the magic that cemented it as gaming royalty so long ago.